Hello, welcome back to Unbox the Imagination. My name is Shenelle. If this is your first time here, I want to say welcome. And if you're returning, I want to say thank you so much for your support. Welcome back. Um, your support means a lot. So thank you for liking the videos, for sharing them, and for commenting. I hope you've been finding them really helpful. So your comments are really helpful to myself to know where we are you finding these helpful, and how can we get more of that? So today, my message to you is on the topic of how to keep moving through life's challenges. And this is a lesson in hope, faith, and endurance. So, the reason why I like to bring you this message is because sometimes life can feel really hard, really difficult, sometimes near impossible. And I know as parents, as people, as persons, we can get overwhelmed with the demands of life and the responsibilities that we hold. So, as parents, we wear many different hats. There are many different expectations, not only from ourselves, but from our loved ones, for those around us, whether they be family members, i.e., our children, spouses, culturally, or even socially. The pressure can feel very real at times. But I'm here to tell you today that you have what it takes to overcome these challenges, although sometimes it might not feel that way. And this is what Unbox Imagination is really about, in you to recognize those tools, those strengths that are already built inside of you, and how, with my support, you can use those tools. You might need to tweak, change, apply, and add some extra tools in, but how you can move from overwhelm to overcome. Can I take a moment just to share a little bit of my story with you? So, I grew up in the Caribbean before moving to England. Now, I wouldn't say that life was easy, but there were some really lovely bits that I remember in terms of having the freedom to be a child, but also the freedom to use my imagination, to just be free. Now, I understand that life isn't like that for everyone. Not everyone has the privileges of being a child and having a childhood which they remember to be fun, although it also had its challenges. But I think it's important to be able to take the good things as well as the challenges and use those as lessons and tools to help you to propel forward. So, what do I mean by this? As I said, I grew up, I remember having some lovely moments, but there were also some difficult challenges. Now, if I choose to focus on those challenges and take only the suffering, the pain, the rejection, the shame, the guilt, or any other things negative that came with those experiences and sit with that, it can feel heavy. It can feel not very nice to sit with. In fact, I would want to distance myself at every opportunity from that. However, if I could acknowledge that, yes, it was difficult, all of these things happened, and validate my experiences, but then also sit and reflect and think, okay, what did I learn from those experiences? Who did I become because of those experiences? Um, what were my thoughts? What beliefs did I have? How did those experiences shape the person that I am now? And then look at it and think, okay, is this where I want to be? Am I heading in the direction that I want to go? Do what I believe align with what I'm trying to achieve in my life? Do what I think, support where I'm trying to get to in my life. And so, if I can sit and reflect and become aware of these things, that can only be helpful to my situation. As difficult as the circumstances may have been, as heavy as the feelings might be to feel in the moment, there's still nuggets of wisdom in sitting in that reflection. And you will always hear me say that awareness is key. And the reason why I say this, because in order to change anything, you have to first become aware that something needs to change. Now, where it gets really tricky at times is where we enter into situations or circumstances where we are reacting rather than responding. And the reaction comes from patterns or behaviors that we've learned along the way. And these patterns are not necessarily healthy for anyone, but they are what drives us. They are in the driver's seat because they are familiar to us. And so we don't have to think about it. We just, it's like autopilot. It switches on and then we're going. And in order to reclaim our lives, we have to be able to switch off the autopilot and say, okay, what's happening with me here? Why am I reacting to this rather than responding? So here's an example. I hope you're still with me here. So maybe an example might help. So if you find, for example, that you are triggered when people ignore you, and the trigger, so first is recognizing what is happening here, what's happening. So someone ignores you, you feel triggered, and so your reaction is to get angry. Your reaction is to be angry. Then it's looking at what then happens when you get angry. So you get angry, you might upset the other person because you're upset, and there's misunderstanding or miscommunication. Being able to slow down or pause and just take stock. What is really happening here? What am I trying to communicate? Is it anger that I'm trying to communicate, or is there something else going on underneath the surface? When you can identify what's really happening, then you can start to change or respond. So rather than react, respond to the situation in a manner that enables you to get your point across. Then you are able to communicate your needs more effectively. So rather than the reaction being the driving force or in the driver's seat, you're able to get back in that driver's seat by pausing, reflecting, maybe asking yourself, what am I trying to communicate here? Or what am I feeling in this moment? And here's a little exercise that I'm going to do with you that you might find useful. So I like to, so this is called the iceberg. Now, there are many different variations of the iceberg, but I particularly like to use the iceberg um, when it comes to emotions and really beginning to understand what are the core emotions versus what might be happening underneath. So, what is seen on the surface and what is unseen underneath the surface. So, I'm going to invite you down here. I've got my paper ready, so come down here with me. Here we go. So this is an interesting setup, so please just work with me for a minute. I'm going to choose blue. I love getting my colors out. So Got some different colors here, but I'm going to choose this lovely blue. Another thing about Unbox Imagination is really about using creativity as a vessel to help to express some difficult emotions that might be coming up, and how to find that inner creativity, that inner release of things that you might have bottled up that you don't necessarily have the words for. So in the interim, this can act as a vessel to help you to express those words, or a medium to help you to express those words. But ultimately, what you're working towards is being able to express that verbally, because our words have power, and you are always working to reclaim your voice. So this is part of the journey, especially, sorry, just coming up for a moment, especially if you are someone who have struggled with finding the words to express yourself, who maybe you've never been taught those words, you've never been taught the different emotions, or it's never been accepted for you to have these different emotions. I know for myself, growing up in the Caribbean, anger isn't, or hasn't, or wasn't, hopefully it's changed now, wasn't an acceptable emotion to have. So then what do you do when you're angry? That gets held inside, and anything that gets held inside begins to embed itself into your nervous system. So any emotion that isn't expressed out healthily gets trapped inwardly, and that is very challenging, because when you do that enough times, it begins to hardwire itself as though it's part of you, but it isn't part of you. And so instead of expressing healthily, it might start to come out as passive aggression, or overwhelm, or anxiety, or frustration. And so this is why we're talking about, or we're looking at, versus the the primary emotion versus the secondary emotions. So I'm going to invite you back down here. Sorry. Okay, hope you can see that. I'll lift the paper up as well. I'll get a better setup, I promise. So, got my piece of paper. What I'm going to do is just do the tip of the iceberg. That's the tip of the iceberg here. Can you see that? And then I'm going to do the bottom half of the iceberg. Okay. Okay, so it doesn't need to be anything fancy. And then I'm going to draw a line to separate the tip of the iceberg like this from the bottom of the iceberg. Okay. And as I said, the tip of the iceberg is what's seen. Okay. Just going to do my little eye here. Okay. So that represents what's seen, what you can see with the eye, the natural eye, what you can see with the natural eye. So, for example, our example that we're using is anger. So, what color? Use not, I don't have red. I use I use my little peachy color. So, our core emotion here, our primary emotion, the one that we're seeing, is anger. So, I want you to think about what anger looks like. I'm going to come back up here. So, this is an invitation, because anger looks different for each person. But if we were to think universally, what would anger look like? Or, so we're going to think collectively. However, what I'm going to invite you to do, you can do this now or you can do it at a later date and come back, look at this video and do it. Personally, which is something I recommend, I want you to explore what anger looks like. So what if you were to recognize anger in yourself or someone else, what would that look like? So for example, someone might be throwing their arms around, they might be screaming or shouting. That might indicate that they are angry. They might be pacing back and forth. They might be heavy, doing that quite heavy footedly or quite quickly, pacing back and forth, as well as throwing their arms around or shouting. So that could be a form of anger. It's quite outwardly. Or someone could be crying, just in floods of tears, maybe clenching their fists, clenching their jaws, um, almost like they're biting their tongue because they're filled with so much anger, but they can't get that anger out. So it's just sitting in the body, sitting there, waiting to explode. So anger could also look like that. Or anger could also be someone almost like a more control anger, maybe even putting their hands up to their head and maybe leaning their head back and just almost like you're trying to brace yourself from escalating that anger. So that could be another form of anger. What does anger look like to you? And sometimes it isn't the obvious things that we know collectively. And that's why it's important, I think, for you to explore this um, on your own, in your own terms, and in your own definition of what anger looks like for you. Great. So what I want you to do is write all those at the top here. So like you said, clench fist, shouting. These are some of the things. Right. Clench fist, shouting, crying, shouting, um, pacing back and forth. Just whatever you want to fill it up with. And these, it's important to realize that these are things that you can see, you can see or hear. So the experience is natural, it's outwardly. Now we're going to look at the bottom of our iceberg. And here we're going to think about the things that are unseen. But before we think about the things that are unseen, I want us to think about some of the secondary emotions that might be happening. So the example that I gave was being ignored. So the outward expression of being ignored is anger. However, is that really what's happening? Or maybe you're feeling rejected. So rejection can be one of the secondary emotions that we put in the bottom of the iceberg. So I'm going to bring you down here again. Bear with me. Okay. So I'm just going to write some of the difficult emotions. Let me put a couple down here. So, well, rejection. There might be shame. There might be guilt. You might be feeling frustrated, so frustration. Again, anger and frustration are two different emotions. Frustration can lead to anger. So we've got guilt, frustration, rejection, shame. You could be feeling hurt, betrayed, lonely. So these are some of the secondary emotions that may be feeding into the primary emotion of anger. Okay. So now that we've looked at the some of the secondary emotions, what we're going to look at is how those might be, or how could those show up in your body. So when I say show up in your body, it's now here we're thinking less of the outwardly things and more of what might actually be going on inside of your body. So it could be things like tenseness in your jaw. You might feel tense in your jaw or tenseness in your neck, so neck tension, or you might get some numbness, or you might have quickened breath. So these are not necessarily things that people will notice unless they're really looking at you to go, oh, you're not breathing well. You know, if somebody gets to the point of really being angry, then you might be able to see that in their breath. They're not breathing, they're just really at a heightened level of anger. And there are different levels of anger that you can arrive at. But here in the secondary emotions, we're looking at the little micro expressions that might not necessarily be outwardly. So we've got neck tension, numbness, quickened breath. I'm going to add one more. Maybe a headache. So these are some of the things that you might be feeling on the inside. I'd like you to take your time and explore again. Maybe this particular part can be more personal, so you can explore that more on a personal level. What does that look like for you? What does it feel like for you? What might be going on in your body? Because it's a little bit easier to understand what that feels like in your body as opposed to in someone else's body. So please, I want to encourage you to take some time and explore that. And then once you finish doing that, you're going to look at your iceberg. And when you look at your iceberg, I want you to just scan over it. Is there anything that stands out? Are you already noticing patterns in terms of maybe the emotions that might be feeding into your anger? Are you able to identify, okay, in this particular situation, when so and so ignored me and I did such and such, and this was the outcome, but really what I was trying to communicate was this because this, I was feeling like this and this. So you're starting to open up that tunnel vision of, right, you've ignored me. I feel angry. That's the emotion that comes up. I'm going to go with that reaction. And what you're doing is you're scaling back and saying, okay, is this really what I'm feeling? Is this really what I want to communicate? Is this really what's happening in this moment? And when you can be honest about these things, when you can pause, naturally you know, you might not always be able to do that straight away. If you can, great, because it means that you can address it in that moment. However, what I find is when you're able to come away from a situation, have some time to reflect and think, okay, how did that go? How could it have gone differently? what part did I play in that? What did I contribute to that? And what would I like to do differently? So you're getting more of a wider lens view of what's happening or what has happened at that point and what you could do differently. If you had the opportunity, what would you do differently next time? And that's how you start to pave the way for new connections, for new ways of looking at things, of one way of moving through life challenges, but starting to claim back your voice, your authority, and your authenticity through the choices that you're making, the choice to respond rather than react using old inherited patterns that may no longer be serving you. So I just wanted to jump on today and give you a bit more of an insight around a practical strategy that you can use to help you to start to look at your own behaviors, your own thought processes, and how they might be driving your choices, how they might be steering the ship of your life, and how you can take back that ship, take back that authority, and start to do things on your terms, start to move towards the things that you want to see in your life, start to align with your goal. And I just want to finish on this. So we can have many strategies, and I like to give practical strategies, which is what I did here. But quite often we still find ourselves almost tumbling through life. So even though we have all the tools, the resources, the support, we can still find that we are not standing and walking in authenticity and authority, but we're still getting carried away with life's challenges. Now, it's important to remember here that life is full of challenges. So I don't want you to ever think that you won't ever go through challenges. So yes, you will go through challenges, you will have obstacles that you will need to overcome, but you have what it takes to overcome them. You have the authority to overcome them. You just have to believe in it. And so this is where the hope comes in, the hope for something new, something different. Yes, your family may have done things in a certain manner. Yes, you may have inherited certain beliefs. Yes, the culture might say, this is how we do it. But you still have the choice as to whether you want to be directed by your ancestors, your culture, your inherited beliefs, or whether you choose something different. You choose a different path. We all have that choice that we can make. And it's in your choosing that you're able to see the difference. And so having hope in something new, something better, a different way of doing things is one of the first steps that you can take. So first, being aware that there's a pattern. It might be a pattern that's not working for you. Okay, I want to do something about it. I want to change it. It's not working. Right. How can I change it? How can I move forward? How, and it's about envisioning that there is something different. And when you can hold that vision, hold that imagination in your mind, then you have something that you can work towards. You have something, even though it's not tangible, you're able to visualize something better for your life. So having that hope, having that vision, and also having that faith in knowing that it can be done. Because if you hold it as a vision in your mind, then there is a possibility. It's just about refining those steps to get to that ultimate vision, that goal, and having that endurance, being consistent, even though the challenges come. So the challenges will come. You're going, you're building momentum. Something comes, whoosh. Okay, you go down, come back up. You're going, you're going, you're going. Whoosh, something else comes. You go down, you come back up. Is being able to endure whatever the challenges are, having a plan, but being consistent and knowing that if you keep going, you will overcome and eventually you will get to where you want to get to. It doesn't happen overnight. It can. There are miracles that happen, but there is work that must be done, and it's through building that consistency and that endurance that you will be able to achieve the things that you want to see. So I hope this message has blessed you today. Please let me know if you want to see more messages like this, where I share things that I've learned, share a bit of practical strategies, all in the aid of helping you to become the best version of yourself, helping you to build a legacy that you want to see. But first, it comes from you pouring outwardly and unboxing your imagination so that you can dream bigger and go towards the things that you want to see in your life. My name is Shenelle. This is Unbox Imagination. It's been a great pleasure to serve you today. Take care and God bless.